They erased me from every family photo, not just the new ones, not just the staged ones, all of them, even the ones from when I was 5, with my hair in messy braids and a missing front tooth. Even the one where I was holding my mother's hand, both of us barefoot on the porch, laughing like we had all the time in the world. Gone. Replaced. Edited. Deleted. It started with a message. Hey fam. Album from last weekend is up. Can't believe how amazing everyone looks. Judith picked the best photos for framing. It was sent to our group chat, Wells Family Forever, a chat I hadn't opened in months. Maybe a year. But something made me click. The link opened a Google Drive folder labeled Wells Family Legacy, updated 2024 edition. The first photo was of the living room in the house I grew up in. Polished floors, fresh white paint, and that same antique mantle that my mom used to decorate every fall with garlands of orange leaves and cinnamon candles. Only now, the mantle was lined with porcelain vases and photos, lots of them, smiling faces, matching sweaters, summer barbecues, ski trips, holiday cards, and not a single one with me in it. I stared at the screen, scrolling faster. Birthdays, graduations, vacations I was never invited to. The housewarming party they threw when Judith redesigned the entire downstairs. I remember getting an invite to that one, 3 days before the event, in a group email with the subject line, "Totally last minute, but would love to see you." I didn't go. Maybe I should have. Maybe then I wouldn't be so stunned right now, watching myself slowly vanish from the very history I helped live. I'm Olivia Wells, 33, and currently curled up on a couch in my Boston apartment, half-finished chai latte beside me, and the digital equivalent of a slap in the face glowing on my screen. My family is in Connecticut. We used to live in a historic colonial house just outside of Ridgefield, the kind of place with creaky floors and attic windows that let in more wind than light. My mom, Eleanor, adored that house. She restored it piece by piece, refinished the woodwork herself, hung antique mirrors with tiny cracks like character lines. When she passed, I was 22. Cancer. Fast. Brutal. Incurable. By 23, Judith had moved in. By 24, my room had been converted into a study. By 26, Grant, Judith's son, my so-called stepbrother, had moved back home, started freelancing as a lifestyle consultant, and slowly turned into the favorite child my father never had time to raise. I'm not bitter. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending like I wasn't there. Tired of watching a woman who didn't raise me, didn't know me, and certainly didn't love me reframe my family history like I was a bad draft she decided to edit out. Gone. Replaced by a photo of Judith and Grant, dressed in matching navy coats, in front of my mother's hydrangeas. I didn't call them, didn't reply to the message, didn't even mention it to my father, though his number is still saved in my phone under Dad Before Everything. Instead, I opened my Dropbox. I hadn't looked through it in years, but everything was still there, old scans, emails, letters, legal PDFs, the folder labeled House Deed. Original will. Mom stared back at me. I clicked it, opened the file, and there it was. They're living in my mother's house. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the city buzzed like it always did. People hurrying, horns honking, lights changing. Full of music, of baking sounds, of old vinyls spinning Nina Simone on Sunday mornings, and the smell of cinnamon in the air by September. She was a librarian, my mom, the quiet kind of fierce. She didn't raise her voice, didn't brag, didn't guilt, but she never had to. You listened when she spoke, because her words were always thoughtful, like underlining the most important sentence in a novel. She loved that house. 143 Willow Lane. She called it our forever project. By the time I turned 10, she'd refinished every floorboard, reupholstered every window seat, and wallpapered each bedroom with floral prints she found at estate sales. She made the place ours, from the crooked porch swing to the creaky stairs that groaned under her footsteps. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4, ovarian. Too late. She passed within 8 months. Fast. Like someone yanking the book out of your hands right as you get to the best chapter. I was 22, just finishing architecture school. I came home for her last few weeks, slept on the floor beside her hospice bed in what used to be her reading room. She told me, one night, voice cracking like old paper, keep the house. By fixing things that didn't need fixing, and then by inviting Judith over for dinner. At first, I thought she was just helping a family friend from his company. She brought casseroles, organized drawers that didn't need organizing, rearranged furniture for better flow. It didn't take long. One weekend, I came home from Boston, and she'd replaced Mom's framed pressed flowers with oil paintings of boats. She moved in 6 months after the funeral. She brought her son, Grant, too. The shift was slow, but deliberate. First, my mother's books were boxed. Then her favorite mugs disappeared. Then the floral wallpaper in her old room was painted over with soft neutral beige. I remember standing in that room once, the last weekend, before I moved back to Boston full-time. Judith stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You should really take your things, she said. This room's going to be Grant's music studio. This was my mother's reading room, I said. Exactly, she replied. Was. My dad stood in the hallway behind her, silent. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't tell me I was right. He didn't say anything. That was his specialty. Silence that cut deeper than shouting ever could. I moved out that month, found a small apartment in Cambridge, got a job at a boutique architecture firm, designed spaces for other people to feel at home in, even while mine was disappearing. I stopped going back to Connecticut except for major holidays. And even then, I'd get last-minute invites, always vague, always like an afterthought. Over time, I became more of a footnote than a family member. Then came the photo update, the album Judith curated, the final edit. Not just my absence, but the revisions. Photos of my mother replaced with shots of Judith trimming the garden. My 5th birthday swapped out for Grant's 28th. Christmas mornings where I distinctly remember sitting by the fireplace. And yet, somehow, I wasn't there at all. It was like someone had gone back through the story of my life and decided I didn't belong in it. And for years, I accepted that. I told myself I was overreacting, that it wasn't worth the fight. That peace was better than confrontation. But now, staring at a legally binding will, my mother's last wishes, signed and notarized, I realized something. This house was always mine. Not because I demanded it, not because I took it, but because my mother gave it to me. And I have spent long enough letting silence speak for me. I booked a rental car for the weekend. Dug out my mother's antique pendant from my jewelry box, the one Judith once said looked too dated to wear anymore. Packed a single folder into my leather satchel. No yelling, no threats, no email replies. Just a quiet arrival. Because if they're going to erase me, they're going to have to do it while staring straight at me. When I pulled into the driveway at 143 Willow Lane, I almost didn't recognize it. The shutters were painted navy now, instead of my mother's signature hunter green. The hydrangeas had been trimmed into geometric little bushes, no longer sprawling and unruly the way she liked them. The wind chimes were gone. So was the welcome mat. In its place, a sleek black rectangle that said, "Live, Laugh, Love" in looping cursive. My mother would have hated that. I sat in the car for a moment, hands still on the wheel, watching the house like it might bite. My heart wasn't racing. There was no adrenaline, just a heaviness in my chest, like the kind you get when you realize the memories you've been holding on to don't exist anymore. Not here, at least. Judith opened the door before I even reached the porch. "Olivia," she said, voice flat but polite. "We weren't expecting you this early." "I texted the time yesterday," I replied, stepping past her into the foyer. The scent hit me first, something synthetic and lemony, like store-bought candle wax. Not the eucalyptus oil Mom used to dab on the curtains. Everything felt rearranged. The soul had been extracted, cataloged, and replaced with decor that matched a Pinterest board titled Suburban Prestige. My father was in the dining room, half watching a football game from the kitchen doorway. "Hi, Liv," he said, as if I'd come back from college for the weekend and not out of years of silence. I nodded. "Dad." Judith had already returned to straightening things that didn't need fixing. "We've put you in the guest room downstairs. Figured you'd prefer some space. My old bedroom." I didn't ask if it had been cleared out. I already knew it hadn't. Grant appeared about 15 minutes later, breezing through the front door like a man returning to his personal Airbnb. "Hey, look who it is," he said, pulling me into a one-arm hug that smelled like cologne and condescension. He'd grown into a caricature of privilege, tailored casual wear, a Rolex half hidden beneath his hoodie cuff, and that ever-present smirk of someone who'd never been told no in his life. "Didn't know you were coming. Big surprise." "Apparently," I replied. That night was a casual family dinner, which meant Judith had catered from some fusion bistro in town and called it Elevated Rustic. She'd arranged the table with matching napkin rings, gold-rimmed wine glasses, and a floral centerpiece that looked suspiciously like silk. "Hope you're hungry," she said. "We made sure to order everything Grant likes." "Great," I murmured. Always the guest of honor. As we sat down, I noticed the gallery wall in the hallway had been expanded. Frames stretched from the stairs to the entryway. Dozens of them. I counted at least 12 photos of Judith and Grant. Skiing, wine tasting, a beach in Cabo. One with my father holding a baby that wasn't mine or Grant's, probably a friend's kid, but labeled 3 generations of Wells. There was not a single image of my mother. Not one of me. Dinner was fine, if you consider emotional minefields disguised as mealtime conversation fine. Grant talked about his consulting work with a tech startup. Judith talked about how she'd refreshed the living room to feel less dated. My dad nodded along like a wind-up doll. "And how does the city live?" Judith asked, mid-chew. "It's Boston," I said, still standing. "Good. You're still doing freelance interior work?" "Architecture," I corrected. "Senior design lead." "Oh, that's lovely," she said, voice syrupy. "Grant's launching a podcast soon. Maybe you can help with the branding." I didn't answer. I just reached for the wine. After dessert, Grant stood to toast the family. "To legacy," he said, "and to the people who keep this house alive." Everyone clinked glasses. I stared at mine. It was the final straw, not the words, but the assumption that he belonged here more than I ever did, that his name was on the story while mine had been edited out. I excused myself before I said something I couldn't take back. In my old bedroom, now the guest suite, my childhood books were boxed in a corner. My desk had been replaced by a Peloton. The curtains were gray. I sat on the edge of the bed and reached into my bag, pulled out the folder. Inside, my mother's will, the original deed, the notarized letter stating that 143 Willow Lane was left to me, explicitly, solely, and unconditionally. But because I was done pretending I didn't exist in my own story, I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was nervous, I wasn't. There was a strange calm in knowing you're holding the truth in your hands. You don't need to raise your voice or plead your case when the paper speaks louder than you ever could. At 6:30 a.m., I was already up, dressed, hair tied back in a low knot. No makeup, no jewelry. I didn't want to look polished. I wanted it to look exactly like myself. The kitchen was empty when I came in. Early light filtered through the windows, dusting the countertops in gold. The silence was thick, but not heavy. It felt expectant. I set the folder on the dining room table, the same one they'd gathered around the night before, toasting to legacy with someone else's house beneath them. Judith was the first to enter. She froze when she saw me seated at the head of the table, my folder laid out in front of me like a quiet threat. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Not really," I replied. She sipped carefully, eyes drifting toward the folder. "What's that?" "Something we should all look at together." The others trickled in over the next 20 minutes, Grant, still yawning, my father, scanning his phone. They took their seats like it was any other morning. Judith passed out plates for bagels. "Before we dive into breakfast," I said, "I'd like you all to read something." 3 heads turned. I opened the folder and slid out the documents, not dramatically, not with flair, just carefully. "I'm just stating facts," I replied. "Darling," she chuckled, "the house was passed to your father. It's always been understood." "No," I said, calm as ever. "It was left to me, in writing, notarized, filed." "Olivia, let's be reasonable. This house has been ours for years. Grant grew up here. We've made a life. In someone else's legacy," I said. "One you didn't earn." Grant leaned forward. "So what? You want us to pack up and leave? Just like that?" I held his gaze. "I want acknowledgement of what you've done, of what you tried to erase. And then yes, I want my house back." My father's voice was barely above a whisper. Your mother. She said you were strong, that you'd know what to do when the time came. He looked at me finally, not through me. I think this is what she meant. Judith stood abruptly, her chair scraping the hardwood. You're making a mistake, she said. You think this is justice, but it's just petty vengeance in a blazer. For the first time, he didn't defend them, didn't minimize what I said, didn't retreat into silence. He just sat there with the truth laid out in front of him. I got up, gathered the documents back into the folder, and left them neatly by the front door. I'll give you all a week, I said. I want to do this the right way. He nodded, didn't ask for more time, didn't beg, just nodded. That afternoon, I left 143 Willow Lane and drove back to Boston. I didn't cry, didn't look back, didn't second guess it, because the truth was no longer a burden. It was mine. I didn't expect them to go quietly. People like Judith and Grant, they don't fall apart all at once. They unravel in controlled spirals, spinning new stories while still clinging to the old ones. The first text came 2 days later. Judith, Olivia, I think emotions got the best of everyone. Let's have a civil discussion before you do something you'll regret. I didn't respond. The second came from Grant. Grant, this is messed up. You're breaking up the family over paperwork? Paperwork. That's what he called my mother's will. Not legacy, not last wishes, not love, just paperwork. By the end of the week, I'd received a formal letter from their lawyer, or more accurately, a lawyer Judith had retained in a hurry. It was the usual bluster, claims that the house had become a shared family asset due to prolonged occupation, that I had abandoned my claim by not asserting it sooner, that evicting them would be a cruel act and emotionally traumatic for Grant, who grew up in the home. What they didn't know was that I'd already spoken to a real estate and estate attorney in Boston, someone my firm had worked with before. I sent her everything, my mother's will, the notarized deed. Even the photos of the house, pre-Judith, the ones where my mother's touches still lingered. She called me the next day. They don't have a case, Olivia, she said. They can stall, they can bluff, but legally? This is yours. That night, I lit a candle on my windowsill and opened an old photo album I'd packed in my satchel before leaving Connecticut. The photos Judith hadn't deleted. My 5th birthday, Mom in her sun hat, frosting smudged on her fingers. Me sitting on the porch with scraped knees and a popsicle. Mom hugging me from behind, whispering something in my ear. I couldn't remember what she'd said that day, but somehow I still felt it. 3 days later, Judith emailed again. This time, it wasn't polite. If you continue with this, we'll pursue legal action, and we'll tell the rest of the family exactly what kind of daughter you are. Vindictive, jealous, and cruel. I replied with a PDF attachment. It was the will, highlighted, underlined, stamped. No other message, just the truth. The silence after that lasted longer. No texts, no calls, no legal letters. Then, one evening, my father called. I hesitated before answering, but something told me to pick up. His voice was softer than I remembered. I asked Judith to move out, he said. I told her it was over. I didn't speak. She's furious, he added. Told me I was throwing everything away. Are you? I asked. A long pause. No, I think I'm finally choosing the right thing, even if it's late. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Judith, standing in the driveway of 143 Willow Lane. Boxes, suitcases, a moving van behind her. Underneath, she's gone. I'm still here, if you're willing to talk, Dad. I didn't reply. Not right away. I just stared at the photo. The image of her leaving. The expression on her face. Not rage, not regret. Just exhaustion. Like someone who finally lost a fight she never thought she'd have to explain. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. 2 days later, Grant moved into a friend's guest house in Stamford. And the house, my house, was empty, waiting. I packed a weekend bag, drove back to Connecticut with the deed in my glove box. This time, when I pulled into the driveway, it didn't feel foreign. It felt like mine. The shutters still weren't green. The live laugh love mat was still there. But that could all change. Because now I had the key. The house felt bigger without them. Not cleaner, not quieter, just bigger. like it had exhaled for the first time in years. I stood in the foyer with the key still in my hand. No one met me at the door. No fake smile. No, oh, you're early. No curated scent diffusers. No background jazz humming from Bluetooth speakers. Just creaking floors, bare silence. And light, soft and real, pouring in through the east windows, the ones my mother used to say made the mornings feel like poems. I had dropped my bag in the front hall and walked from room to room. The walls had been painted white, a cold, modern kind of white, the kind Judith loved. But underneath, I could still see the subtle bumps and uneven textures from when Mom had plastered them herself. I ran my fingers along the living room mantel. They'd taken down the faux eucalyptus garland, but I found one of Mom's old ceramic candle holders tucked in the corner of the built-in shelf. Judith must have missed it. She always hated clutter. Upstairs, my old bedroom had been cleared. The Peloton was gone. The walls bare. The closet empty except for a shoebox on the top shelf labeled in my handwriting, high school stuff. Don't toss. I pulled it down, opened it. Inside, a friendship bracelet, a disposable camera, a folded up note from my mom, written in her script. If you ever feel like this house forgets you, remember, you are the reason it became a home. I sat on the floor and cried for the first time in years. Not out of sadness, out of finally being seen again. My dad stopped by that evening. I didn't expect him to, but around 6:15, a familiar knock echoed through the hall. I opened the door to find him holding a takeout bag and a six-pack of ginger beer, Mom's favorite. Didn't think you'd want to cook, he said. Figured we could eat on the porch. He looked older, smaller. Like the past few weeks had peeled something off of him he'd been wearing for too long. We ate on the back steps like we used to. No plates. Just containers and plastic forks. For a while, we didn't talk. Just watched the sky fade from gold to violet. Then he said, softly, I think I let her rewrite too much. I didn't answer right away. Your mother, she made this house feel like a place to grow up. I let it turn into something else. You didn't just let it happen, I said. You stepped aside. He nodded. I was tired, weak, guilty. Pick a word. Absent. I said carefully. You were absent. He swallowed hard, set his fork down. You know, Judith always said you left because you couldn't handle structure, responsibility. That's funny, I said. She was the reason I created structure. I had to build one just to survive. He looked at me, and for once there was no defense in his eyes, just recognition. You didn't deserve that, he said. The porch light flicked on above us. A moth fluttered near it, circling in silence. I've been going through Mom's old files, he added. Found the original contractor invoice. She paid the entire down payment on this place. I know, I said. She told me. She left it all to you for a reason. I looked out at the yard, still neatly trimmed, but empty now. No more legacy parties. No more curated events for people who never knew her. It wasn't just about the house, I said. It was about my place in it. And now? He asked. Now I'm home, I said. And I don't need permission to be here anymore. He left soon after. Gave me the kind of hug that fathers give when they don't have the words yet, but are finally learning to look for them. Before he walked away, he turned and said, You're stronger than both of us ever knew. And then he was gone. That night, I slept in my old room. Not the guest suite. Not the couch. My room. I opened the windows, pulled out one of Mom's old quilts from the linen closet, and fell asleep to the hum of summer insects and the creak of the house settling around me. It didn't feel like a war zone anymore. It felt like mine. The photo went back up on a Sunday morning. Not with ceremony, not with music. Just a nail, a level, and a hammer I borrowed from the old shed. I held it in both hands before I hung it. The same frame that once sat by the front door, the one with the photo of my mother holding me on the porch in a faded summer dress, her smile open and real. For years, Judith had tucked it into a storage bin labeled MISC, outdated. But it wasn't outdated. It was ours. And now it was back where it belonged. Since returning to 143 Willow Lane, I hadn't changed much yet. Not visibly. The wallpaper was still too beige. The rugs were too sterile. The gallery wall still had empty frames. Judith had taken most of her curated photos with her. But that was okay. It gave me room to start over, room for new photos, real ones. My father stopped by once a week now, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to sit on the porch and sip coffee without speaking. We didn't talk much about the past. We didn't have to. But every once in a while, he'd bring up a memory, something small. Your mom used to hum when she baked. She hated the wallpaper in the upstairs bathroom, wanted to replace it with tile. She always said you had her eyes, but your grandmother's stubbornness. I started writing them down. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted the pieces back. Pieces of her. Pieces of me. Marissa, an old friend from architecture school, came down to visit and help with the redesign. She walked through the house with me one afternoon, sketchbook in hand, asking questions like, "What do you want people to feel when they walk in? What memory do you want the living room to hold? Where should your mother live in this space?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that. I chose to keep the bones, the crown molding, the fireplace, the creaky stairs. But I replaced Judith's gallery wall with one of my own, photos of my mother, of me as a child, gap-toothed and sunburnt and laughing. A black and white of my dad, back when he still wore flannel and worked on the garden. One of me and Marissa on graduation day, arms slung around each other. A Polaroid of the sky the day I came home, soft and gray like memory. And in the very center, the photo that started it all. Me and my mother, barefoot, holding hands, frozen in time. A month after Judith left, word started getting around. Cousins called. Aunts messaged. One even asked if I'd hacked the will. I didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't post anything. Because I didn't need to defend the truth, I just needed to live it. Grant tried reaching out once. A text. Grant, so you win. Happy now? I didn't reply. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about remembering and reclaiming the story that had always been mine. I took Mom's teacups out of the attic one day. They were wrapped in old newspaper, fragile and perfect. Watched the light spill across the floorboards and let the silence settle, not the suffocating kind, but the peaceful kind. It was about truth, about the quiet power of staying, even when they tried to erase you, of being present in a room they never thought you'd return to, of owning the space they once convinced you didn't belong to you. They took me off the walls, so I put myself back, frame by frame, memory by memory, story by story, and now the house remembers me. Because I remember me, and that's more than enough.